recording. So we are here, we are back, and we are trying to figure out what we're going to talk about.
I think you put
And
something in Slack last time.
we had an extra in there. Let's see. So we had anti-habits and fun habits. Oh, so we had like focus improvement, which would be interesting because I'm trying to remember what was on my mind with that, but I think I can work on that. Um,
Did we do
what
forget
else?
forget? That was
What?
no, that was more New Year's Eve. We had wrapping up your business in the new year goals. I think that might have been for the New Year's episode.
Yeah, that's all the New Year's stuff.
Anti-habits, fun habits, focus improvements. Kind of going back because I thought I had one more up there.
And so this is, oh,
We've already talked about automating processes, right?
yep,
Yeah.
talked about automation. Let's see, what do we got as we're stepping into the new year? What is a good habit?
Well, the focus and improvements I like because I know we've talked about the um, Pomodoro technique
Yep,
list, things of that. But even with those, I guess we also talked about being present in meetings.
yep. I
Huh?
think another one is we'll see. This sort of goes with focus improvement a little bit, so maybe a good pairing is leveling your daily grind, basically. Because what I'm thinking about is like maybe some habits to help people so it's not so much feast or famine where it's like, okay, I'm having to like work all night and work 48 hours straight to get this thing done. And then I'm done, and then I'm sitting around and not I don't have anything to do and I'm twiddling my thumbs for a couple of days. It's not as it's that kind of thing that's not as common now when you've got so many people have sprints and stuff like that and smaller projects and smaller things. But when you're doing, 6, 12-month, 18-month projects, it was very bad. It's very difficult in those to be focused in the early ones because you're like, I can take a day. Who's going to care? And then you get to the last couple of months, and it's like, okay, canceling vacations and holidays, and everybody's got to work 7 days a week, and some of that kind of crap. That's maybe for ourselves finding ways to help that out. So less highs and less lows, sort of like more of a steady stream on your staying busy.
Yeah. So staying
And
focused.
both of these are sort of time management stuff, but
Yeah. I
uh,
think that's where you were going with the focus too, because I think during the holidays we were all over the place, even with trying to follow, what we've talked about up to now. But it's like trying
I
to
think
stay on
even
task with
yeah, with
multiple.
focus improvement, I was thinking even within the tasks that we know we have is making sure that we're sort of like it is a little bit like that. It's basically it's being present in whatever the task is that you're working on and not, you know, drifting too much, squirreling away or chasing down rabbit trails.
Oh, I think we did talk about that one a little bit because wasn't that also like the screen time in that, trying to narrow your focus? Just
Well, that was eliminating bad habits.
that's right. Okay. Yeah, for
Well,
those of you in the pre-show, this is what happens. A lot of the things we talked about can cross over and become multiple conversations.
yeah, sure, a little higher, so my knees aren't quite as cramped. Well, let's start with the focus improvement. We'll see what happens if we can start with that and see where it goes, and then we'll come into the next one and we'll figure out what we want to go with that. At least we have some ideas for it.
Yeah, that sounds good because I think the initial idea for pushing this to this week's podcast was because the other two made more sense together, and this one I think we thought we'd have something else to go with it to kind of pair up the week.
Exactly. So we'll see how that goes. Let me put my do not disturb to make sure that's not distracting me too much. And we'll do our famous 3, 2. Well, hello and welcome back. We are continuing our season where we're building better habits, building better developers through those habits. We are Developreneur. I am Rob Broadhead, one of the founders of Developreneur, which doesn't always roll off the tongue real well, especially when I've only had like a few cups of coffee, or tea actually is my drug of choice. Anyways, already digressing. So it is one of those days, I guess. This episode that we are going to talk about improving your focus. So it's going to be perfect topic for this. I want to introduce myself a little bit more. I am also a founder of RB Consulting, where we are a boutique consulting firm. We basically help you wrangle your technology that's out there, your needs and the technology you already have. So that technology sprawl that we tend to have, just like you may have in your personal life, you've got just too many devices and too many things you're looking at. Try to find a way through simplification, automation, integration to just focus those things down. So your technology is now your friend and your tool, and not the thing that is sucking up all of your time. Also, going to be some of those things are going to be helpful as we talk about the topic this episode. As far as habits go, really burning in the Pomodoro has continued to be, I cannot push that enough to say, if you haven't go back to that. It was one of the early episodes. Basically walk through what a Pomodoro is. We talked about doing, just instead of trying to do them all day, but just try to have a couple a day that are focused periods. It has really helped me, and it's also helped me with one of the other habits we talked about, is basically doing stuff that's fun. So the things that I really enjoy is giving a little bit of time to that. And this is by doing things that are fun. That's the stuff that I enjoy at work. And it's also touching some of the projects and some of the things that I need to do so that they don't just falter and disappear. And the next thing you know, you haven't touched that in 6 years and you forget where it was at. So there's a lot of benefits in those, in the habits. Automation continues to be a good one. I think it really is one of those that's just like, if you can get into that each week, look at one or two, even just one thing that you can automate, that will build up and give you a nice snowball effect. Related to the snowball effect is my good and my bad. The good, well, we'll start with the bad, I guess, is we just got pummeled by snow. So we're pretty much snowed in right now. It's like, I don't know, more than an inch, which around here is too much snow because they don't have cleaning other than the major roads. Major roads, probably fine, but getting to those, a bit of a challenge. So that's, I guess, a bad thing. But a good thing is now that I'm snowed in for the weekend, I get to catch up on a lot of the chores and tasks and stuff like that. That was my ever building list of things that got pushed to tomorrow and then tomorrow and then tomorrow and tomorrow. And coming out of a very busy holiday season, probably a real good time to have, take a couple of days and catch up on such things so that my mental health can actually improve as well. Somebody whose mental health is not improving at all right now because he's stressing out because I'm about to put him on the hot seat is my co-host, Michael. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, my name is Michael Meloche. I'm one of the co-founders of Developreneur, Building Better Developers. And I'm also the founder of Envision QA, where our entire focus of our company is to bring test-driven development to improve software development within companies, be it small business, medium-sized businesses, healthcare, to take your software that is potentially having problems or user experiences are buggy. We help you streamline that whole process to make sure that when you write code, build code, it is tested, and when it gets out to the users at the end experience, they have a nice experience with the software. No bugs, no problems. And with this process, it also helps streamline the development process so your developers aren't spending as much time tracking down bugs or missing bugs because they can push a button and know if the software works before they even roll it out the door. Talking about good and bad, good, uh, had a very productive week this week. Things are moving along on our project. Bad, like Rob said, we got snowed in. I think we got more snow than you guys. We're up to about 8 inches, and I'm praying it melts tomorrow because we are going to the airport next week so my wife can fly to California. Hopefully not deal with the fires, but we'll see. Uh, Habits. So I have been doing really good on some habits and really bad on others. So the Pomodoro, I started really good at the beginning of the year and I've kind of slipped. I've gotten into some bad habits where I've been kind of heads down coding, and the next thing I know, I am 5, 6 hours in and I have not moved from my desk, which also means I'm failing the taking breaks habit. So I've kind of slipped a little bit, but the good news of that is I actually got a lot done. Like I was so in the zone and really cranked stuff out. Downside, I'm a little more burned out. So, getting back into some good habits, which kind of worked into that, was I was following some good lists, checklists. I was more focused in meetings, and I was actually really working on trying to plan things and schedule things. The problem was I was so overbooked that I wasn't moving things forward. So back to the habits of this week is trying to get back to the Pomodoro and taking breaks and kind of, like Rob said, getting to the point where we can spend time with family and friends and doing things we want.
Well, that's what that's gonna be part of the side effect, I guess, of what we're cover this time. And what I want to talk about is we're gonna talk about habits related to essentially improving your focus. And this is not just, it is a little bit the general distractions that we've talked about, whether it's your phone or your mail or some things like that. But it's really more along the lines of being busy versus being productive. It is about figuring out what is it that you actually need to do for the things that you need to do. It may seem like that's too many to-dos in a sentence, but it really is. We have tasks, we have things that are our responsibilities and our assignments, whether it's in personal life or more often, and which is where we're going to really focus today, is in the business, whether it's our side hustle or our main hustle. So we've got things like we will have, tickets maybe that we're working on. We will have a product that we're building or a design that we're creating or something along those lines. And there is a lot of stuff we can do that is effectively busy work that is not terribly useful to us. I mean, yes, it needs to be done, maybe, but sometimes even then it doesn't need to be done. It could be pushed to a later date and then suddenly it just sort of evaporates because we didn't need to deal with it. Now, some people are sitting there out there maybe saying, yeah, that's why we don't have to actually document designs and requirements because they're always going to change. Like, wrong. That is not it. I'm not talking about like eliminating everything that you don't like to do, which is effectively documentation. But it is making sure that what you do is productive and serving the goal that you have. For example, some people can write, like say, take a weekly status. And over the years, there are some developers that their weekly status is, I wrote code. Okay, not very helpful. And so you actually, in that case, you sort of wasted your time even putting that down. It's like you need to have something that is useful. That's like, hey, I worked on this, I worked on that. Here was a challenge. Here was something I overcome. Something that provides whatever level of insight is needed for that task, that weekly status task. Hopefully, your manager, customer, whoever it is, can help you refine that. Now, sometimes overcommunication is not a bad thing, but maybe in your status, instead of I wrote code, you have a breakdown of every hour, like how many lines of code that you looked at and what you wrote, and maybe you've got like code snippets and things like that you've pulled into it. While yes, that thoroughly documents what you did, nobody cares. It's one of those that it's like you're adding documentation that's not needed. It's the same idea as if you generate a report to somebody and it's got a million records in it, it is too much. Nobody's going to look through a million records of data. You need to keep your why in focus. So if you're building a product and you're going to show thousands and thousands of records in a report, then instead of, yes, maybe you can spend your time and now you've built that report and you can check that off and that's a function or a feature that you can say like, hey, we can do that. Maybe take a look at that and instead of doing that, figure out what is the actual goal? What are you trying to serve your customer with that report? And then maybe you need to make adjustments. A lot of times it's things like maybe it's a summary, or maybe it's just an exception report or something along those lines. And those are, I mean, we've learned some of that. Like exception reporting is sort of an industry standard. Nobody cares if you process a million records successfully. Nobody wants an email that says, I processed record 1, 2, 3, 4. They may want to say, yes, I processed a million records, but that's one value. That's not a million values. Or that's one ping to your phone, not a million pings to your phone that everything's going well. Because if you have everything going well and then somewhere in there it went wrong, you've got too much information. So that's where we want to focus. We want to focus on the why. And that's, I think, the easiest part. That's sort of the easiest way to describe what we're going to have in the challenge this week is how do we get to the why? How do we figure out, build some habits that will help us do the right thing, do the valuable thing? And how do we avoid going down those rabbit trails that we sometimes do? How do we avoid losing a day tweaking a color on a website that when the color is just for us and it doesn't matter to somebody else? I mean, there's things like that I know we've all done. And we come back and we're like, wow, I spent a lot of time on that. And it really is going to come back to, was that time valuable? Was it time well spent? And so before I go into the challenge of the week, I'm going to throw this over to Michael and get your thoughts on all this.
Yeah, so it's rather interesting, our conversation today, improving our focus, explain the why. Uh, Very interestingly, a task that was given me this week was I was handed a project from another team with literally no guidance other than here's some documentations, and all we're expecting you to do is just stand up the code. What we don't know, or what we don't have access to, is we don't have access to the previous developers. So we have teams that are working with this product, but no one knows how to stand up this product. So we are literally blind and kind of going into this like, oh, how the heck do we do this? And that is a bad practice because really, you want your focus to be hand off software, have another team come in, pick up the software, and hit the ground running. You don't want to essentially hit a roadblock like that. So to me, a lot of times when you're like focusing on your why or like focusing on, what it is that we're doing to stay productive, you kind of have to look at what you're doing. Like you said, um, make sure that the tasks you have can be productive. Make sure that the stuff that you're working on, ask yourself, like you said, is this moving the ball forward? You don't want to spend a day working on a color, but if your task is to build a dashboard, you do need to make sure that some functionality and features of that dashboard work. You want to make sure that the user inputs are there. That is important. The look and feel maybe not as important at the beginning because what you want to do is you want to make sure that the feature is functionally complete. And then you can come back later and add all the bells and whistles and make it look good. Now, there is a caveat to that because, yes, sometimes look and feel may not be important, but those actions, those controls are. However, you don't want to spend, like Rob mentioned, you don't want to spend days on a drop down list to make it like cross functional, make it look all nice and pretty, but you do still need to make sure that it meets the requirements of the user. So it kind of our why kind of goes back to those requirements or maybe lack of requirements is what is it that they want? How do they want it implemented could be loosely interpreted, but essentially what you need to do is you need to make sure that you get it functionally complete that hey, this worked the way it's intended, and then kind of move on from there. You can come back and apply focus later. Interestingly enough, that can also flow to those status emails or that end of the week status updates, like Rob was talking about, because as you're building something, as you're working on your tickets, yes, you're writing code, but you're working on requirements, you're working on functionality and features. So when you go to write those status updates, depending upon who your audience is, yes, it can be very technical. However, if you're dealing with customers, 9 out of 10 times, they don't care about the technical. They care about that functionality. They care about the requirements. What is it that you're doing that is giving them quality or the quality of the code? What is it that you're doing to the code that they will see, that they will understand? So you need to make sure you essentially can talk to that functionality. Hey, I was working on building you this uh, dashboard for this functionality. Within that dashboard, these are the features I worked on this week. You don't have to get real technical with the code, but you might want to specify, though, or highlight features that may be feature complete or are still in progress. So as you're working on your why, as you're working on your focus, think about these things and also think to make sure that you're working to get to that feature complete, not, oh, this is a nice bell and whistle. Hey, look, I did something. No, 9 out of 10 times, what we do as developers is never seen by the end user. They just see software that works, and that is all they care about. So be careful trying to show off and make sure that you show up and make sure that your software delivers what you're trying to do.
And that's really like the focus is that there is a, I think we exaggerate how impressive our software is to people, to our end user. There are a lot of, most often your end user is going to be impressed when the software works. If you've got like a nice little, spinning wheel that shows up at certain times, or you've got a certain color that's just like been, scientifically proven to be soothing or whatever it is. And there's all these things that we do that we don't necessarily need to do, that we're actually, in a sense, we are actually being bad stewards of our time, of what our customer is paying us to do, or our boss or employer is paying us to do, because they're paying us to solve problems mostly. Now, you may be in a situation where the problem you're solving is a marketing problem, so you have to appeal. But that's then the focus, the design, the pop, or whatever it is, the call to action. Then sometimes it is very valuable to spend that time because that is your goal. That is what you want. So in that case, maybe the content and the presentation are number one if you're at the top of a funnel. But when you get to the end of the funnel and you're giving a product that somebody's purchased, then it's like you walk through that funnel, you built up that story, you built up all those the value proposition. So you now have to deliver on the value proposition. At this point, the value proposition is not smoke and mirrors. It is not prettiness. It is nailing the requirements that you have laid out for the customer. And with any product, that's what it is. For example, you can look at spreadsheets are great. That's a good example of this, because really what you want with a spreadsheet is you want to be able to take a bunch of numbers and stuff and present them in a way that you can see a lot of information at once, and then you can do a lot of wheeling and dealing with it. You can do calculations, all this kind of stuff. You don't need, generally speaking, you don't need like really pretty cells and stuff like that. You just need a grid, and you need the ability to put as much crap on the screen at a time as you can, basically. So it's very functional. It's very specific in its function. And a lot of what we do, I think we overcomplicate and think that we should provide more than we should. So that's where I want to get to this. It's really, it is, busy versus productive, which really comes down to, is this functional or is it pretty? Am I, essentially just trying to present this in a better light than it is, or am I trying to make it better so I could, the goal would be that even if it's the ugliest presentation, the functionality is so good that it's still compelling, but then pretty it up as well. Now, one of the wasted time things is what Michael sort of touched on, is the idea that like get the functional first. You can throw something out there that's visually okay. It doesn't, you don't want people to like, oh, my eyes are burning after they see your interface, but they don't need to be like, they don't need to go and like say, I have to go smoke a cigarette after seeing the, your interface either, because the functional thing needs to be complete. You may add buttons, you may remove buttons, you may add fields and remove fields, you may move fields around, you may have validations and communication of some sort, like notifications and messages and all this kind of stuff. That's all going to be part of completing the functionality. Now, maybe you know exactly what it's going to look like from the start, so you can do all those things at once. But normally that's not the case, because there's going to be things that we're going to get into that is an unknown, and now we've implemented the functionality. It's like, oh yeah, that's right, we need to do this differently, or we need to change that. And that means anything that you changed it, if you spent time beforehand putting it up and trying to make it pixel perfect, then you've probably wasted your time, because now everything else around it maybe has changed. And so this, again, it comes down to knowing where the value is. And that's the habit I want to sort of look at. That's a challenge. This is much like taking a break. It is on a given day, because we're building lists, we're doing all these things, is maybe look at what's on your to-do list for today, or tomorrow when you're putting your list together. And with that, when you put your list items on there, think a little bit about what does it mean to check that off? What do I need to do to check that off? What is the goal of that thing? What is the why for that checklist item? Because I can be working on that checklist item all day and maybe not make a lot of progress until the last 5 minutes, and then it's like, boom, I'm done. So you just wasted all day minus the 5 minutes. So that's what you want to look at. Is it's sort of like performance tuning your to-do list. Maybe that'll be the title of the podcast. That's actually a pretty cool idea. But it's looking at your to-do list and saying, what is the most efficient way for me to get this thing done? It's a little bit of design work on your to-do list before you get into doing your to-do items. It's thinking about, how am I going to approach this? How am I going to work with this? And this is something that you can actually benefit from as well. The idea of, like, maybe there's some ordering to that to-do list. Maybe we've talked about like batching things together and things like that. So maybe it makes sense to do these 3 tasks and then these other 3 tasks because they are very familiar. Or it may make sense to do this task and do this very different task because it allows you to switch gears. It forces you to take a little bit of a break. So think about your why on your to-do list. And that's where I want you to do is for the next week, as a challenge, is every day when you build your to-do list, before you dive into it, take just a couple of minutes and think about each of those items. Maybe you add another level of detail to your list or some notes or something like that to remind you, what is it that I really need to accomplish to get this done? And then at any time during the day, if you're sitting there and you're just like, I'm heads down and I'm cranking through stuff, maybe periodically or put a little reminder alert or something like to say, am I actually doing the things I need to do? And this, I think, will help you with some of the other things we've talked about, like meetings. And if you're walking around the office and people start talking to you and you just get sucked into, water cooler talk or whatever, because you can say, wait a minute, I got to get back and do this thing. I think it's going to help you stay focused. It's going to help you first personally to avoid rabbit trails, but then also when you're dealing with other people. And I want to throw that to you, Michael, give you sort of the last word on this.
Yeah, so I kind of like where you went with that. So the other thing with that is, don't be busy, be productive. Don't be the person running around the office with your cell phone on, making it look like you're busy, you're talking to someone. Be at your desk, be present, get your work done, stay focused, and you're going to see probably an improvement in productivity and a decrease in distractions.
So one of the things that's very productive that you can do right now is write us an email. Send us an email at info@developreneur.com. You can also contact us out on Facebook at the Developreneur site. You can check us out on developreneur.com. There's contact forms there. You can provide comments and feedback on any of our content that's out there, which is literally over thousands of articles out there between podcasts and videos and blog articles and all kinds of stuff. Wide range of technologies that we cover, everything for beginning developers, and there's even some more advanced topics in there as well. Love for you to check that out. You can also find a lot of the video stuff, amazingly enough, out on YouTube. We've got lots of stuff there on the Developreneur channel, old mentor sessions and presentations of varying sorts, and then a lot of these. You may even be there. Hello to all of you that are in the YouTube audience, because we also do the podcast. We have a video version of that as well every couple of days when we put these things out. Feel free also leave us feedback on wherever you listen to podcasts, because there's so many of those out there, the podcatchers that are out there. We'd love to get feedback from you, whether good or bad. We just want feedback because we want to know how we can serve you better. We want to build the better developers, but we're also building a better podcast in doing so. At least that's our goal. That's our why. So now I'm going to let you to continue your productive day. Go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time. Bonus material.
So I was thinking through this one. It kind of bleeds into some of the other podcasts as far as the bonus stuff. But again, as you're going through your daily processes, as you're trying to figure out your why, write those lists. Make sure you keep track of what it is you're supposed to be doing, so that you can kind of check off and go, okay, yes, I need to get this done. I need to get this done. But also, as you're looking at those lists and you're making those checks, make sure that your focus is on what it is and that you're staying within the scope of your task. So you don't essentially have scope creep, like we talked about, where you get stuck on a little button adding all that functionality and feature. Stick to the scope of what your task is meant to be. If your task is too broad, yes, you're going to run into that issue where your focus is going to be jumping all over the place. Look at your task, break it down, redefine it, and make sure that that scope, I mean, think in testing terms. If then, there should be a one-way path to get to the end of your task. Now, how you get to that path may be chopping down trees, maybe getting on the interstate, but how you get there is the journey, but you have to define your starting point and then define your destination, and then your focus and your scope is going to be to get from A to B. You shouldn't have A to B to C to D to D back to B. It should be strictly A to B.
I like the path analogy because I'm thinking about that just as something that may help you guys out there and gals is think about making if you're going through a heavily forested area or something like that, and you're trying to hack your way and make a path. Well, the goal is to have a path through there. The goal is not to have necessarily a pretty path. So if you're whacking away at the big things and clearing out a way through so people can walk through it, then you are being productive. If you're going through and you're like trimming the sides of the flower so it's far enough out and there's not like one branch out of place or something like that, then you're probably not serving the greater purpose. And while that may be useful, to some extent, and you can argue that like, well, somebody could get hurt. That little branch could whack them and they could draw blood and they could die from bleeding to death or something like it. We can find ways to argue the importance of our stuff, but honestly, if we're arguing that there's importance to it, even with ourselves, and it's probably not that important. And it's really that argument should be, should I do it at all? Then you can have that longer argument of, yes, it's at least worth it to some point come back to it. But if you're arguing right now whether there's important enough to do it today, then you probably should just pass on that. The bonus thing I want to talk about is really timeliness of getting stuff done, because we touched on it a little bit through the episode, but I really want to go back to that because when you think of what is now sort of has become a big thing, like the just-in-time delivery, just-in-time fulfillment. And that's what Scrum and Agile is about when we talk about development, is it's about doing it when it needs to be done and not doing it sooner and not doing it later. And so this is where, especially we talk about like maybe visual design and functionality and things like that. And this is where particularly where I think it helps us when we're designing software. It's a little bit one of those advanced techniques or whatever, is that you can look at the big picture. Like, what's the problem I'm solving? What are the steps to solve that problem? And then looking at those steps, is there commonality? Michael mentioned the idea of like the components and things like that. So maybe you've got a solution that's got a bunch of drop downs. And maybe it makes sense to just each time you do that, build your drop down and do your little list. But maybe in looking at it, it is worth it. It is a worthwhile investment to instead say, I have to do this 10 different times. And instead of doing it in a larger sense and having a lot of work 10 different times, I can do it once and then plug a couple of things in. So it talks about the idea we're thinking about like code reuse and things like that. So it's looking at the big picture. And then find the way, and this is sort of to prioritize, is first, there's the things that we're going to use a lot, which goes to sometimes why there's struggle early on and we're building a product because we're really building a framework of some sort. It may not be a full-blown framework, but it's essentially the framework for this solution, for this product, for this application. And so we're building these pieces, and it's things like, it's the general look and feel and some things like that. Then we're going to spend a little bit of time. We're going to put that there. So now we have placeholders for the features that we're going to build later. And so we need to think about, am I building something right now that I'm going to actually replace with a general solution later? Or am I building something that this is, when it's done, it's going to be done? And that's sort of the follow-up to that is understanding. And it goes back to the challenge of the week is it's understanding what does done mean? What does complete mean for this list item, for this thing that's on my task? And if I do that, I think that will help me. I know it helps me, and I'm hoping it will help you. In the global sense, hopefully when you're doing that, it will help you maintain that focus. And so like Michael said, it's one of those, when you say, I'm going to work on this task, you know that this is where I'm at. And because you know what the goal of that task, what is completion for that task, then you can make sure you're focused on getting to completion. And anything that takes you off of that path, you can rein yourself back in and get to the completion of your task. That being said, we have gone a little bit, I guess not too long, but a little over on this one, mostly because we were trying to figure out what the heck we're going to talk about. And I think it did turn out pretty good. So stick around because we'll probably do this again in the very near future. That being said, go out there and have yourself a great day. I'm going to go have some more tea because I'm not caffeinated enough. And we will talk to you next time.